I'll wait for chat to catch up. How am I looking? A little scruffy? Yeah, yeah. So yesterday, if you will recall, I did a, well, let's see, give me a, where's Tiffany Dover? If you can hear me and see me properly. I'm assuming that everything's copacetic. So I'll just get to it. So if you recall yesterday, I did a video where I talked about 4 videos that I'd seen, and I think I conclusively proved that they were propaganda. They were completely manufactured videos. The 4 videos alleged to have shown combat in Ukraine, and I showed that, or the aftermath of combat, and I showed that they were PR stunts. They were hoaxes. They weren't real. Mm? And a lot of other people have looked at those videos and realized, of course, that the tanks were not Ukrainian tanks. That's the other thing they weren't Russian tanks, rather. They weren't destroyed Russian tanks. They were destroyed Ukrainian tanks. That's another point that I kind of missed. Like when this whole issue came up, I pointed it out, but back on Twitter and stuff. But on the video, for some reason, it slipped my mind, but it's not important. What's important is that you saw those 4 videos of James Vasquez, of Ultra Cool Girl, of Guy in Black Mask, and Belarusian Volunteer. All 4 of those were faked videos using the same sets. And I think that everybody would agree, that I showed conclusively that it was the same set or the same location. And in fact, the guy who did the most work on that, Nameless, well, he pinpointed the exact location. I'm not passing that information along, but he pretty much pinpointed the information, the location, and through other sources, we got a hold of the names of some of the crew members, but we're not 100% that they're the crew members, the people who actually shot the video. They weren't Ukraine, by the way. Well, not all of them, of course, but anyway, that's not important. What I want to emphasize is that yesterday's live stream conclusively proved that the Ukrainians manufacture videos, okay? Manufactures videos about the situation going on here now. Okay, so today, a whole bunch of stuff came out about Bucha, which is a suburb of Kiev. Now, you see, the way the Russians are fighting this war, they're not trying to conquer cities or conquer territory. What they are trying to do, as they said in their strategic objectives, is to demilitarize and denazify. And what does that mean? It means getting the Ukrainian armed force to either surrender or face annihilation. Simple as that. And so the strategy that they've been employing is called mobile warfare, okay? Maneuver warfare. The idea is not to capture territory, but rather move troops, move men and material so as to draw forces and then attack in different directions, okay? And so in this kind of maneuver warfare, which is very common and typical in World War II, the point is to make feints and moves and attacks and then retreat to draw forces towards you and away from some other location where you're carrying out a battle. Now, the Russians, they said that from the get-go, they weren't really interested in conquering Kiev. What they were trying to do was to draw forces, pin down forces, Ukrainian forces, in and around Kiev, force them to defend Kiev so that they could have their way with the southern coast of the Black Sea, or rather the northern coast of the Black Sea, the south coast of Ukraine. And that's what they did, and they finally captured and controlled Mariupol. There's some sporadic fighting, but it's not going to change the outcome of the war. And now that they've achieved that objective, they're turning to fighting in the area of Kramatorsk, which is in the southeast, near the Donbass contact line, where they are in the process of dealing with the 60,000-man army that the Ukrainians have there, which is completely cut off and doesn't have any gasoline and cannot be resupplied. And in fact, the communications are sporadic, if there are any at all, see? So they're going to deal with that army, and that's why they pulled their troops out of Kiev to reroute them via Russia around the country and back in, and to get them to fighting there around the Kramatorsk area. Hmm? Okay. Here in Kharkov, we've noticed a significant decrease in shelling. It's clear that, yeah, they're pulling out here too, see? Because it was a feint, or it was part of their overall strategy. And of course, they're going to come around here to Kharkov later on, once they've dealt with the Donbass situation. They're going to win, okay? And all of a sudden, today came out like a whole bunch of videos showing all of these dead bodies strewn around the town or the suburb of Bucha. And throughout these videos, these people were bound and lying dead throughout the suburb, just scattered about hither and yon. Mhm. I mean, they weren't like all grouped together in a single place and all murdered, you know? No, and they were lying in the middle of the street, on the sidewalks, all over the place. And there were several videos, like for instance, there was one where a car is, or an armored vehicle of some sort. I have no idea which one. Don't ask me those kinds of complicated questions. An armored vehicle is going down the street and has to zigzag around these bodies lying on the street. And the car behind, from which the video is being filmed, shows this, and the car also zigzags between the bodies, which that immediately struck me as very odd. Mm. Because you see, when you see a body lying in the street, you don't leave it there. Mm. And it was very odd that all of these bodies were arranged in such a way that it was possible for the cars to zigzag between them and never have to stop because a body was lying right in their path and have to move that body. And it also didn't make sense for the people who dumped the bodies, but okay. It seemed weird. And the first video that came out, there was a artifact in the video because the video was not of high resolution. And so there was like this little artifact that streaked by that looked like a hand of one of the people lying on the ground. And people initially thought, oh my God, that guy's hand moved to touch his face. But then on closer inspection of a higher res version, an earlier version of it, it was possible to see that it was actually a raindrop that was sliding across the windscreen. And as it slid, it just so happened to catch, and there was a parallax effect. It caught right on the image where the guy is going by, and that's why it gave the illusion of this. And there was also the camera panned around, and it briefly showcased the side mirror of the car. And on the side mirror of the car, it seemed as if one of the corpses left behind was sort of like rolling over and getting up, okay? And like everybody thought, and myself included, everybody thought, oh my God, that's fake, it's fake, it's fake. But then later on realizing what was going on is that, see, a lot of mirrors nowadays, on the very edge, they go wide angle, and it's like it's a flat mirror, but then at the very edge, it goes wide angle so that the driver can see his blind spot. And it was pretty obvious that that was what was going on. And it was getting distorted because of the wide angle of the mirror. And it gave the illusion that the person was standing up, that the body that was lying on the ground was standing up, or rolling over in preparation to standing up. But it wasn't the case, okay? It was just, and I looked at it carefully. But even so, there was all kinds of weirdness to the videos. They just didn't seem real. And there's another video, and by the way, all these videos are on my Telegram channel. You can go check them out. And if you don't want to scroll through everything, all you have to do is go to my Telegram channel and go to media on the Telegram channel, and there you'll spot all the videos, and it'll be easy to see them. And see, the point is that, see, these videos, I post them on my Telegram channel. I can't post them here because of the limitations I have, that I just have my phone. But they look fake. They look goddamn fake, okay? And it's not something that I would say, even without knowing that the Zelensky regime has previously faked video, which I showed yesterday, that they faked those videos. I showed it conclusively, and I don't think anybody doubts that those were faked videos. The video today, just looking at it, it just looked fake. Now, there are several sets of videos, but two videos in particular are very noticeable. The ones of like this, the car, a passenger in a car, inside the car is filming video with his cell phone. It's horizontal. And he's following an armored vehicle that is slightly ahead of him. And the two vehicles are zigzagging between these bodies on the ground. And then there's another that's very high production value. That is on my Telegram channel. And I'll post the link to these videos in the description after this stream is done. And in this very high production quality video, I mean, like, you guys know, I mean, my older CRP fans, right, before this newfound fame of Gonzalo, Lira, you know, here stuck in Kharkov, right, my CRP fans would know all about my, you know, coach posting, you know, like Coach Kino, right? Because I love having cool gear and doing high quality videos and experimenting with looks and textures and all the rest of it, insofar as my videos are concerned. And so I have some experience with video production. And of course, before, in a previous lifetime, I used to direct movies and produce movies, and I have a lot of experience with very expensive high-end camera gear. And I can tell you right off the bat that in that second high production value video, it had these perfect shots of these dead bodies and all the rest of it. First of all, the cameras that they used were very high end. Okay, I mean, it's not merely that they had high resolution. Okay, the lenses were very, very expensive. Okay. I'm talking Canon Ls, you know, or Zeiss lenses on if they were using a different system rather than Canon. And I mean, it was really noticeable. And also there was very, very good post-production. They color corrected that just to a T. You know, they just ever so slightly brought up the contrast, okay? But they brightened the color just a little bit. Just a little bit of oversaturation, but just a tiny fraction of it, okay? And so just everything just like popped and feels hyper real, okay? And of course, when it feels hyper real, then you know it's fake, okay? And what was really interesting about these videos, okay, I looked at them very, very carefully a number of times. Now, unfortunately, you're gonna have to take my word for it, but take notes of what I say, and when you see the video, compare and contrast. What I noticed off the bat right away is that you don't see any wounds. You see the dead people and their bodies are intact. You don't see any wounds. And in fact, you don't see their faces. None of them show their faces. There was one body I saw, alleged body, that was lying on its back, its head on the curb and its body like stretched out, like perpendicular to the curb, stretched out across the street, lying dead there, its face staring up. But it was taken, it was a medium shot taken far enough away that you couldn't really see the face. But the pallor of the skin was wrong. It was a little too yellow. It hadn't been a recent death. It had been it was wrong. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it was wrong, okay? Now, all of the bodies that they showed, except for the hands of one woman, that it showed her hands tied up with this white cloth binding. Now, the white cloth binding stuck out, and it's at the very beginning of this high production value video because it's pristine, it's not dirty. And anybody who's been in a combat area can tell you that people get dirty really fast. Their gloves, or if they don't have any gloves, their hands get grimy and dirty very quickly. And the reason is very simple. When you have like a lot of explosions and combat and stuff like that, dust and dirt gets kicked up all over the place. When you have an explosion of any kind of bomb within 500 meters of you, the dust that's kicked up just envelops everything in a cloud, okay? And it's this fine mist, okay? And this fine mist takes forever to settle. And so that's why your hands, your hair, your face all get dusty, okay? And I've said before, that's how you can tell when somebody's faking it, because they're not dusty. Their hair is not dusty, their face is not dusty, and it's very hard to fake it, okay? Because I was emailing a couple of people, production people back in Chile, and they were telling, yeah, it's hard to fake that dust, okay? Because it's to get that big cloud of very, very fine dust and you walk through it, then you get like this even coating of it, and which is very typical. Or you're just sitting there, some explosion goes off and all this dust swirls around you and slowly settles and you get covered in it, right? Either way, whether you're stationary and it settles over you or you're moving and you go through it, you're gonna get covered in this fine, fine layer of dust and you can't fake it. It's just too hard, okay? And of course, when you're covered in dust like that, it's your hands and everything. And so anything you touch, it's going to get dirty. Okay. And see, these people's the bindings, they were pristine, they were white, like nobody touched them, okay, or whoever touched them had clean hands. And there was something too, the bodies all were conspicuously covered, okay, and that didn't make any sense, you know, because a lot of times what happens, and you see this a lot, have you noticed, like in car accidents, there's always some random sneaker lying around? Mhm. And when there's like bombing or any kind of violent activity, a shoe always flies off, okay? Which makes complete sense. You know, a body is thrown around so violently, that a shoe just pops right off, okay? It's kind of sad and pathetic to see a lone shoe there. And of course, you know, the owner is God knows where, the impact, right? But all these people were perfectly clothed, and, and they were all lying around in a way that just didn't make any sense. Because you see, when you come across an area where there are a lot of dead bodies, it's a shock, of course, but you don't leave them lying there. mm? You move them around, and very quickly. I mean, the authorities come awfully quickly, okay? Whatever authority is around, and they start straightening up the situation and collecting all the bodies. You don't leave bodies lying around like that. And the video, that high quality video, to shoot it, it took a long time. It took a long goddamn time, you know? Because they used reflectors, you know, to catch the light so that they could fill in the light of some of the objects. They didn't use electric lights, but they used a bouncer. A bouncer is like this mylar that's stretched out, that's silver, that's covered in silver, and it allows to bounce light so you can direct it someplace, right? Now the day was overcast and had pretty flat light, but even so, they need a bouncer a little bit. Mhm. And all that just takes time to set up, okay? And by the way, these cameras I'm talking about, very expensive cameras, they're incredibly delicate, okay? And you don't break them out to film something like that, okay? And so it doesn't make sense that there'd be these bodies lying there and that they'd go and get the good gear back at wherever and bring the good gear to shoot this and wait and take the time. It just didn't pass the smell test. And here's something else that doesn't pass the smell test, which is much more to the point. This was pointed out to me by Moon of Alabama, a great blog that you guys should check out. Go look up Moon of Alabama. He's a smart customer. And he pointed out something in a tweet that I hadn't thought of that was just so obvious. The Russians withdrew from Bucha on March 30. And before they withdrew, there had been no talk whatsoever of any kind of abuse by the Russian soldiers on the civilian population. And the fact is, the people in the civilian population in that area were able to communicate with the outside world unimpeded. And they had communicated different information, you know, Facebook, Snapchat, all that good crap. Okay, so there was no question that they were perfectly fine, and the Russians weren't messing with them because they weren't interested in the civilians. Okay, they've made that clear all over the place. They were interested in dealing with the armed forces of Ukraine, but they weren't interested in dealing with civilians or harming them in any way. They brought supplies and humanitarian aid. Okay, and that's a known thing. Okay, maybe it was a PR stunt, maybe it was, but they did bring that gear for the civilians. Okay, and they hadn't made any effort to harm civilians in the time that they were occupying Bucha, right, which is basically 30 days, and they withdrew on March 30th. And on March 31st, the mayor of Bucha said that there were no more Russians, and he made no mention of the fact that there were a bunch of bodies. Apparently, at last I heard, it was 80 dead bodies lying scattered around his own city. He hadn't said a word of that on the 31st of March. And he didn't say anything about it on the 1st of April or the 2nd of April, which is when the Ukrainian armed forces moved in, including elements of Azov Battalion and other right-wing scumbags. And then today, all of a sudden, all these dead bodies show up and these pristine, perfectly made videos. That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense at all, okay? Because, see, I'm the mayor of my suburb or town or whatever, right? And see, these Russian invaders, they leave. Okay. Now, first of all, if I'm a mayor and I've heard rumors, a mayor's gonna hear rumors of all kinds, right? People are gonna come up to him, to curry favor, to inform him, to whatever, but they'll tell him stuff. So if atrocities are taking place with the Russians, the mayor's gonna know about it. If 80 dead bodies are lying around in the street, he's gonna know about it. Okay. You're telling me that on the 31st of March, he doesn't say a word, even though he says that there are no Russians in his town. So he's not worried about Russians. And on the 1st of April and the 2nd of April, he doesn't say anything either. And all of a sudden, on the 3rd of April, there's full court press over this Russian atrocity. Sounds like bullshit to me. Sorry, I mean, it would be understandable if the Russians were retreating and there was still a chance that they could, come back in if he said anything and retaliate and have reprisals and stuff like that. That would make sense on the 31st. But by the 1st of April, certainly the 2nd of April, yesterday was the 2nd of April? Yeah. Yeah, he would have said something. It sounds like bullshit. And I have to insist, the way the bodies were treated, they're all left lying there. Now, a lot of people are analyzing all this video footage, and a lot of people are saying, look, they use reverse angles here on this street, but the bodies are different. I'm not gonna go there because that's a rabbit hole, and it takes a lot of time, and I need better footage, to tell you the truth. But of the video footage that I saw, it just didn't pass the smell test. And you guys know that I have a really good sense of smell when it comes to bullshit like this. I mean, like when I saw the James Vasquez video, I knew it was bullshit. I said so. When I came across this Ryan Perkins fellow, I knew he was a glowy, and I said so, and he was. And James Vasquez was full of shit, because the other videos proved that it was all a set that they'd done, right? And this shit, I gotta say the same thing. It just smells like bullshit. And the timing is way convenient too. These atrocities are coming out right, just a few days after the actual atrocities of the Ukrainian armed forces kneecapping and shooting in the groin a bunch of Russian POWs. Those were actual atrocities. And that was, again, the internet is great about doing this. There is always that guy out in the internet who takes the time and the trouble to figure out where that happened. And they figured it out. It was like some milk factory about 23 kilometers from my current position in the in the south east of the city. And in an area known to be controlled by the Ukrainian armed forces. So there's no question that those atrocities happened. Okay, and lots of other atrocities happen. Okay, and they've been video documented. I mean, these goons of the Zelensky regime are bragging about this stuff. See, the Zelensky regime issued a diktat a couple of days ago, a decree, saying that nobody could anymore film or publish any more incidents of any sort of combat incidents, right? And on pain of getting into all kinds of trouble. The reason for that is because they want to prevent their own scumbags from filming the torture that they're carrying out, because these morons, they do this because they're proud of it. They don't see anything wrong with it, okay? Because they're fucking animals. It's as simple as that, okay? Now, these videos, they just, the Bucha videos, the so-called Bucha massacre. There's something else too. Those bodies that are lying around, okay, this is just a vibe, and I can't prove this, okay? But some of them look like mannequins. Not all of them, but a lot of them look like mannequins. Some of them clearly were dead bodies, no question. Okay, there was a couple of photographs in an alleyway of some cadavers that were lying in some alley with like a lot of debris, a lot of trash. Okay, not like debris from explosions or something like that, but like outright trash. And those look real, like real bodies. Okay, I mean, like I said, I've seen enough, and that's part of the reason that I've been out of commission for a few days, because I saw so many bodies and so much video of just gruesome torture and torture and murder that the Zelensky regime goons were carrying out, that it severely disturbed me. I mean, I have to admit that it's been a low point of this experience. Okay, not actually, being out on the street and seeing shit that's really scary. No, just seeing this video of this garbage, of this horrible image. Okay, I mean, if you don't feel compassion for the people who suffered in those videos, then you have no soul. It really, it's just heartbreaking. But anyway, the point I want to make in this live stream, that's as you can see, it's not so tight as the one yesterday. But I just have to say, man, and I'm willing to stake a lot of my reputation, if I have any. It looks like bullshit. It looks like some of the corpses, so-called corpses, some of them were real, but some of them looked like mannequins that have been dressed up, that have been dressed by a set decorator. Because of course the footage and the pictures are coming from different sources, right? And different locations, clearly different locations, and clearly all in Bucha. But like for instance, the bodies that are lying on the street and the cars are zigzagging between them, those bodies were planted there. And like I said in my Twitter, in my Telegram feed, they're too tidy. Mm? Because when people get shot and dumped, okay, once you're dead, okay, a lot of your muscles relax and everything, and so when they just toss you out of a car or something, right, wherever they're tossing you from, I mean, your legs splay out in weird directions because there's no muscle control over it, right? Your legs don't fall neatly together and like curved, right? Like when you lie down in bed, right, and you have your legs together and curled up, in the semi-fetal position, right? That doesn't happen with dead bodies. There's legs are all over the place, right? And sometimes they break, you know, because since there's no muscle control to control weird movements, sometimes when bodies get dumped like that, like for instance, like a hip socket will pop out, or all kinds of weird shit. It'll look weird, and there'll be bone breaks because there's no muscles holding it together anymore. You see, and so like these bodies, they were all tidy. And they were all dispersed in this strategic place that there was like one here and one here and one here and one here. That's almost like designed for the cars to go zigzag. And none like in the middle of the street. Okay. Now, if you shoot somebody and you want to dump them, right? You're going to shoot them in a van. Now, those vans, they only open on the one side, maybe, right? Or it just didn't make sense. I'm trying to argue or explain away or speculate, and it's pointless to speculate because the answers can be limitless. It just didn't make sense that the bodies had been dumped so strategically. Okay? And like I said, that high production video, it's not real. I know when they're showing me something that has been produced. And that video, the high production quality video, that was fucking hyper produced. I mean, that shit was expensive video. Very high end, very well done, very well executed. It would look very good in a movie. And that's how I know it's not real. Okay? Like Patrick Lancaster, whom I suggest you check out, right? He came across a body of a woman, dead woman. And it's in a video, and you can find it on YouTube. One of these recent ones, Mariupol. And he comes across this woman's dead body. Now, she'd obviously been raped and murdered. And what they'd done, these bastards, is that they painted like a swastika on her chest and belly with her own blood. Okay. And it was just horrifying, right? And when Patrick Lancaster was filming it and came across it, and he kind of like showed it, and then like pulled away and like looked at the camera and said, "Oh, there's this dead body here," and kind of shocked. He didn't actually show that much of it because, see, when you come across something like that, it's just not how you react. Okay. But these were like the Bucha videos that were lovingly filmed. And the Patrick Lancaster videos were, I mean, he filmed them really shitty, okay? It was actually because he filmed them so badly, it was actually hard to tell where the body ended and where like debris and crap of the location began, okay? Which is the way things actually are, okay? Because the body was covered in dust, of the dust I explained before. And I'm like, yeah, the Patrick Lancaster video, that's real. The other thing too, the video of Patrick Lancaster, the woman that had like a swastika painted on her chest and belly, it was brown, okay? And that's how you know it was blood. Because blood oxidizes, okay, fairly quickly, you know? And so what happens is that when it does, it turns brown. Mm? It's not bright red. And in the Bucha videos, there's a lot of, there's like some corpses that are like half buried in sand, which is just weird. And the blood around their faces, or what is alleged to be their faces, because their faces are all like hidden, okay? You don't see any clear face in any of these goddamn videos. And the alleged face, well, there's like blood and it's bright red. And you're like, no, that's not real. First of all, because sand would absorb liquid, and so what would be left behind is on the sand would be a very fine layer of blood, and that very fine layer of blood, if the Russians left on March 30th, by today that stuff would be brown. It would look almost black. Okay. It wouldn't be obvious that it's blood. You'd have to actually pay attention and look at it and say, oh yeah, that's dried blood. Okay, because if you ever look at dried blood, I mean, come on, how many times have you like popped a pimple on your when you're going to sleep and you pop a pimple and the next morning you wake up and there's like a little spot of blood? Is it bright red? No, it's brown. Okay, and we've all done that. Okay, so we all know what a little splotch of dried blood looks like. It's brown. It's not bright red. Don't give me this bullshit, okay? The only bright red blood that exists is the bright red blood that is used in film production. It's some dye. I used to remember what it was made out of. I've forgotten that. It's trivial information, but the point, that dye stays red for a long time, or permanently. Mm? Real blood doesn't. It goes brown, and goes brown very quickly. I just, yeah. It just doesn't make any sense. And also, see, the Russians came into Ukraine with 190,000 troops, right? I have no doubt in my mind that some of those 190,000 troops have committed war crimes and atrocities. No doubt in my mind. Why do I think that? Because every army has its share of bastards. Every army has its share of war criminals. Every one. I mean, even the Swiss army, okay? The most squeaky clean army, I guess maybe with the Dutch army or something, they all have it, okay? And what, you think the American army didn't have, some guys? Look up My Lai, okay? Or My Lai. I forget how you pronounce it correctly. My Lai. The whole murder of the whole village in Vietnam, in the Vietnam War, okay? I mean, soldiers go a little nuts, inevitably. Because of industrial warfare, it's surprising that so few go nuts, quite frankly. But anyway, the point is that in every army in history, there are war criminals. But those war criminals are not going to manage to kill off 80 people. One or two, maybe four. More than that, it's not going to happen, okay? It's not going to happen. And most of the time, these horrible crimes, and I'm not saying that they're good, I'm saying they're horrible, but most of the time, these horrible crimes, what happens is a pair of soldiers or maybe four soldiers, what they'll do is they'll kidnap some poor woman and rape her and murder her, and blame it on the enemy. That's basically what happens, okay? Sometimes other events happen. Sometimes a soldier comes across some civilian that looks at him the wrong way, and the soldier gets pissed off and shoots him, and they cover it up. Shit like that happens all the time. It's inevitable. 190,000 men, of course something like that is going to happen, okay? But at least 80 people lying around in the street, it doesn't make sense. I mean, it doesn't make sense with an army that has had strict orders not to mess with the civilians. Like I always say, I'm here in Kharkov in the middle of a siege, and I still have the lights running. I still have internet. I still have water. I still have electricity, heating. Well, we don't need heating much anymore, but you see my point. It doesn't make any sense, okay? And all these stories that are coming out, that the Russians are war criminals, and some asshole former major in the U.S. Army called Spencer. I think it's John Spencer. He popped up on my Twitter feed. Even though I can't post on Twitter, I still have a feed, and so I've been following this guy. And this asshole is just like going, we should go there and peacekeeper, call it whatever. We will have to put boots on the ground and stop this and shoot Ruskies. I mean, he's advocating for World War III based on this incident. And I'm like, how prevalent is that notion? Because clearly this whole incident was set up to pull at the heartstrings of Americans. Americans are like puppies. I mean, Johnny Depp said this years ago, and he had to walk it back and say, I respect Americans, but he was right. Americans are like puppies, okay? They're emotional, they're stupid, and they run around without any thought, any consideration as to the future, and they're pathetic. I mean, I'm just up to here with Americans of all stripes, between the decadence and degeneracy, the fatness, and the loser leadership that it's got. I mean, dude, anybody worth anything in the United States should leave. I've said this since last October, man. The United States is toast, and all the people there, fucking losers, every single one. But they're puppies. They're puppies, just like Johnny Depp said, and they are willing to throw any kind of common sense out the window because they're dumb as puppies. That's the truth. And this Bucha massacre, quote unquote, it's being used to tug at the heartstrings of people so that they will support a U.S. involvement in a war that, number one, the Russians are winning, and number two, if the Americans get involved, it will escalate dramatically to the point of possible nuclear weapons. And by the way, the Americans are so damn dumb because they think that they're going to waltz in and they're going to win. They are going to get their asses handed to them because the Russian army, they are tough motherfuckers. They are winning this war as they tiptoe through the country, because they have been tiptoeing through the country. They haven't hit any civilian infrastructure of any note, except if it's a military target, a legitimate military target. I mean, they are going about this invasion as humanely as possible. And there have been enough accounts from various cities in Ukraine that prove conclusively that the Zelensky regime's forces have committed untold atrocities on the people. The very fact that they have parked military vehicles by civilian apartment structures, hospitals, and government agencies to draw Russian fire so that they can later score a PR coup with the destruction of the civilian apartment complex, that just goes to show you what pieces of shit they really are. The Zelensky regime, they're just pieces of shit. The fact that I'm underground, kind of like proves the point. You go to my Twitter feed, Real Gonzalo Lira. The first pinned tweet is the names of people who have been kidnapped and murdered, and that's a very, very short and very, very partial list. They've kidnapped and murdered a whole boatload of people. They're fucking evil. I mean, there's no question about it. And the Americans are siding with the evil guys, the guys who are literal Nazis, and they are believing the propaganda of literal Nazis. I just don't get it. I mean, I have to just say, are Americans that fucking stupid? I mean, it just boggles the mind, really. It's just like, because it's understandable that, no, it's not understandable. You all know the story of the Ghost of Kiev. Oh, this great fighter pilot ace who shot down 6 planes on the first day. Oh, oops, it was made up. And then the 13 on Snake Island, and oops, it was made up. And then all kinds of efforts to create false flags and all the rest of it, sending an RPG team into the Zaporozhye nuclear power station, which is what the Ukrainian side did, so as to draw Russian fire, and then later claim, oh, look, they're shooting at a nuclear power station. I mean, these guys, that's how they play. They play dirty, okay? And my great fear has been that they are going to set off a false flag, and that with this false flag, it will draw in the West into this war. Now, I suspect, and we'll probably find out about this much, much later, I suspect that they have tried to do some sort of false flag with chemical weapons of some sort, and that those efforts have been nipped in the bud by the Russians. Because the Russians, you know, for all their flaws, they're really, really good at human intelligence. They must really have a good idea of what's going on in Ukraine. But this thing, this PR move, they're trying to use this as the false flag. They're trying to use this so-called atrocity to convince the West to join this war. And it's a lie. I mean, I just know it's a lie, okay? It's just, it just has that look, that feel, that vibe of a lie. And like I was saying, in that well-produced video, one of the things that really struck me, like there are people who are walking through, I mean, like observers, like people, just regular people. They're walking through and observing all these, this panorama of death, of all these bodies lying around helter-skelter, and they're just strolling through it. That doesn't make any sense. People don't act that way in the presence of a dead body. When you're in the presence of a dead body, it freaks you the fuck out, okay? I'll tell you that right now. You don't stroll casually through a bunch of dead bodies. It freaks you out, okay? You go straight to the bodies to stare at them. And you want to stare at them. Of some people approaching a dead body, look where they're looking. They always look at the face of the dead person. And sometimes they look at the face and then look away. But it's the thing that captures their attention. They're not like looking around at the scenery and strolling through while a bunch of bodies are lying around. That doesn't make any sense, okay? And what happens is that after the shock of seeing some dead person, you go over and you start moving them around, okay? You start to tidy them up, okay? And you always see their faces, see? In all the other pictures that the Ukrainians have released, where they show a dead Russian fighter or whatever, they always show the face of the person who's dead, and he's clearly dead. And often they show even the identification of the person who's dead. How come there's no picture of these civilians, of their identification cards or their faces? No pictures at all. There's something else too. A lot of these people have white armbands. Now, this is significant, okay? Because you see, the white armbands during the occupation by the Russians, it was to signal that they were pro-Russian, or at least they were like, but basically civilians. So don't shoot. That was basically the reason for these white armbands. And it's known that the Zelensky regime thugs hate anybody who's pro-Russian. I mean, they've gone so far as to murder members of parliament, murder their own negotiators, whom they perceived as being a little bit too pro-Russian, okay? They murdered their own fucking negotiator, okay, or one of them, you know? It was 7 guys and they shot one. Now, do you think that they would hesitate with some civilian who was showing some armband that he was like pro-Russian, or at least not 100% with the crazy-ass lunatic neo-Nazi scumbags of the Zelensky regime? Huh? It just doesn't make any sense. The whole thing just smells to high heaven. I just had to put it out there. This is not a very well-structured live stream. It's me just sort of like rambling on about this shit and telling you to look at videos that I'm not providing, at least not here. Go to my Telegram channel. The link's in the description below. But I'm telling you, it stinks to high heaven. This is bullshit. And Moon over Alabama really nailed it for me, okay? It was so obvious. I mean, I'm kind of upset with myself that I didn't think of it myself, you know, that it was, of course, if they left March 30th, and March 31st, the mayor said, everything's clear, coast is clear, no more Russians, and not a peep about 80 dead civilians just lying around on major streets of his own city, because these are like wide avenues, at least for Ukrainian standards. These were major streets, and they're just lying around. It doesn't make any fucking sense at all. And he said nothing on the 31st of March or the 1st of March or the 1st of April or the 2nd of April. And then all of a sudden we have these perfectly shot videos of professional standard. Doesn't make any sense. And like I said, see, the so-called bodies, some of them looked real. Some of them looked real, but I can't pin it down, but they didn't look dead. Okay? They looked like actors lying down. And some of them looked like mannequins. And they were all covered. And that's the thing. Their heads were covered. I mean, like they all had like hoods, or sometimes like this weird stretchy hood that isn't very common except among military people, now that I think about it. And always with their face lying down or looking away. You never saw their face. And you're seeing dead bodies lying around. So why is anybody going to be squeamish about showing their faces? Showing the faces of the dead people, I mean, right? It just didn't, no, it's bullshit. It's bullshit. And I'm putting out this video because if my opinion counts for anything, I want you to look at those videos and pay attention to them and tell me if they feel real after you look at them for a while. Because to me, they don't. Just like the James Vasquez videos didn't look real. And these videos don't look real. And by the way, a lot of Russian media has pointed out that, you know, one of the corpses looks like it's moving his hand, and the other corpse looks like he's rolling up and standing up. In both of those cases, it looks that way because of the degradation of the image, because of multiple copies and multiple compressions. But it's actually the first one, the hand, so that people think it's actually a droplet of rainwater that is reflecting light and sliding across the windscreen at the exact moment that the camera is looking at the body, or the alleged body. I don't know if it was real, a mannequin, or just an actor, but it's looking at that, and the water droplet reflecting light, and that's why it's sort of like white and makes it look like a hand. Because it's a very small part of the image, of course, and so small that it just looks like a hand, like rising up from its side to scratch its face, okay? But it was, like I said, a droplet of water. And the other one was the curvature of the mirror that goes from a flat to a wide angle. And that gives the illusion that the object is rolling over and about to stand up, but it's just an illusion. It's not real, okay? But I'm saying this because, you see, my object here, okay, I mean, like, I said this on Telegram. A lot of people are saying, well, why don't you just shut the fuck up already and pick a side? You know, are you on one side or the other side? Make up your mind. And I don't have sides. Fuck sides. I'm not interested in a side. I'm interested in knowing the truth. Now, why am I interested in knowing the truth? Well, because you see, the reality around us, you need to understand factually accurate information of it so that you can make rational decisions about your own actions, what you are going to do. Now, this Bucha massacre, so-called Bucha massacre, it's a lie. But it might convince a lot of people to go into a war that they will lose, that will cause untold suffering to more people, and that they will ultimately lose and regret having gotten involved in. I mean, look at the sanctions imposed on Russia. The United States and Western Europe, I mean, Victoria Nuland, you know, the Wicked Witch of Washington, right? She went to Russia and she told them, we're going to destroy your economy. We're going to crush it with sanctions. And they went ahead and imposed all their sanctions. And what happened? On Monday, the Germans have announced that all their supermarkets are going to raise prices between 20 and 50%. 20 and 50% more expensive for food. Their gas prices in Europe are going through the roof. In the United States, gas prices are going through the roof. Inflation is starting to pick up, and pretty soon it's going to be out of control because of the sanctions. And what's happening to the Russian economy? Well, you know, the ruble, rather, you know, shot up from, you know, something like 70-something rubles to the dollar to 144 rubles to the dollar, and then just drifted right back down, and now it's at 80 rubles to the dollar. Mm? It was just a yo-yo. It just went up and down, and now it's going to get stronger than ever because they're tying it to gold. Mm? It's going to be incredibly strong currency. Huh? And the Russian economy is doing fine. You know? Yeah, they don't have McDonald's anymore and they don't have a bunch of industries, but they're getting replacements from other places and they're trucking along. And the key issue, of course, is that, see, you can live without an iPhone. You can't live without food. Mm? And the Russians, between their very, very close association with Kazakhstan and Belarus and their virtual control of Ukraine, they control 40% of the world's wheat export market. Just the one guy in the Kremlin, Uncle Vova, dictates 40% of the global market in wheat export, okay? He gets to decide whether you eat or not. And he said, unfriendly countries have to pay in rubles. There's a big fuck you very much to the unfriendly countries, and we all know which ones are those unfriendly countries. Europe and the United States, see? And see, what's going on here? Why is the European and the American economies going broke? Because of the sanctions. And why? Because they didn't look at reality. They didn't want to look at reality. They didn't want to see the truth. And so because they were living in a fantasy land, they thought, oh yeah, we'll impose sanctions and we'll screw those Ruskies. Yeah, we'll show them. And what happened? Because they didn't appreciate the reality of their situation, they didn't appreciate the fact that the Russians had such a commanding position in essential commodities. And the Russians had been incredibly patient selling West stuff and all the rest of it. Energy, gas, gasoline, oil, food, and all the rest of it. Just patiently selling this, and all of a sudden with these sanctions, the Russians said, oh, fuck you then. I'm not going to sell you any shit unless you pay me in how I like it. And all of a sudden, these economies realize, holy fuck, we're fucked. Because they weren't appreciating reality. They weren't looking at the truth. See? They made a horrible decision that is affecting you in Western Europe or the United States. They made a horrible decision that is going to affect you and is probably going to make you go hungry or cold this year, and make your savings become worthless because they refused to look at reality. They refused to find the truth. See? When you go by lies, when you live by lies, you live in a fantasy land, and eventually reality is going to hit you. Reality is going to hit you, and the reality is not merciful. On the contrary. And that's why I want to know the truth. That's why I want to know the truth about Bucha. Because if the Russians really did go ahead and just butcher 80 people and just dump their bodies in the middle of the street, okay, that's a fucking war crime. That's fucking evil. Let's find out who did it and figure out how to deal with this shit and a proportional response. This is horrifying. If they actually did in cold blood kill 80 defenseless civilians, this is fucking horrifying. But let's find out the truth. But if the circumstantial evidence says, oh, it doesn't look like that, and if the track record shows that the other side tends to lie their fucking ass off every chance that they get, well, dude, you see what I'm saying? I'm not pro-Russian. I'm not pro-Ukrainian. I'm not anti-Russian. I'm not anti-Ukrainian. I am indifferent. I don't care. All I care about is knowing the truth. Knowing the truth, because the truth is always the best. It's the easiest. You don't have to remember much when you just tell the truth. And that's what I want, because with the truth, people will make rational, sound decisions that will minimize loss of human life and minimize destruction of civilization. But in the West, they live in fantasy land. And the United States is the empire of lies. And they tell lies all the time to explain away their brutality, their greed, their evil. And they tell so many lies that they've come to believe them themselves. And let's stop with all the bullshit. Let's stop with all the lies. And this Bucha thing, let's stop it from triggering an escalation of a war that we all already know how it's going to end. It's going to end with the absolute victory of the Russians. And I'm not saying this because I'm pro-Russian. I'm not saying this because I'm anti-Ukraine. I love Ukraine. I live here. I think it's a wonderful country, wonderful people. But I'm not blind to the truth. I'm not blind to reality. And the thing that terrifies me is an escalation of this war for no reason, based on lies. That is why I want to get to the bottom of this. And that's why I urge you, don't believe their lies. Okay? Okay. So I've talked almost an hour. Jesus Christ, man. I only wanted to get on, for a few minutes and say my piece. But, well, you guys know that I love to hear myself talk. Take it easy, guys. Be good.